The intercom on my desk buzzed at 8 in the morning, and my receptionist's voice came through careful and strange, the way people talk when they already know they are handing you something heavy. "Miss Larkin," she said, "there are 3 people in the lobby. They don't have an appointment. They say they're family." My hand froze over the speech I'd been editing. Family. 5 years. No calls that mattered. No letters that weren't threats. No apology. Not once. And now 3 people standing on the 14th floor of a building I owned a piece of, in a city they had never once driven to see me in. I want to stop right there for a moment, because if you have ever been the one your family counted out, the one whose dreams got filed under not realistic, the part that comes next is the part I need you to hear, and I promise it pays off. But to understand what happened when that elevator opened, you have to know what happened at a kitchen table in Simsbury, Connecticut, 5 years earlier, and you have to know about one piece of paper my father never knew existed. My name is Marlo Larkin. I am 23 years old. And this is the story of how a man signed away $182,000 with my name on it, told me to go learn a trade, and accidentally taught me exactly how to build a life he could never touch. Let me take you back. I grew up in a colonial on Sycamore Ridge, white shutters, a wraparound porch, a mailbox. My father repainted every single spring because in the Larkin house, how a thing looked always mattered more than what it was. From the street, we were a catalog family. From the inside, we ran like a small country with exactly 1 vote, and my father, Clifford Larkin, held it. Dad was a regional sales manager for a medical device distributor, 40 minutes up the highway. Briefcase, tie clip, a handshake he practiced. He controlled every dollar that moved through our house. My mother, Paulette, did not have a credit card in her own name until she was 46 years old. And if you understand nothing else about my family, understand that. The rules were never written down. They didn't need to be. My brother Bryce, 3 years older and 6 inches taller, was the center of my father's universe. Bryce got the new laptop every fall. Bryce got driven to travel baseball tournaments in 3 states. Bryce got his own room when I was moved up into the half-finished attic at 12, because my father said, "Your brother needs space to focus." I got the dishes. I got the laundry. I got the quiet understanding that my job was to help my mother keep the house running while the men in the family chased bigger things. There is a particular kind of childhood arithmetic that a kid in my position learns without ever being taught it, and I was fluent in it by the time I was 10. I knew that my brother's birthday meant a party with a caterer, and mine meant a store-bought cake, eaten early so my father could catch a game. I knew that when Bryce brought home a C, my father called the teacher to argue, and when I brought home an A, my father asked why it wasn't in a subject that led somewhere. I learned to want less out loud because wanting things out loud was a way of causing trouble, and causing trouble was the one unforgivable sin in that house. So I got small. I got quiet. I got very, very good at watching. I was good at one thing, and I was very good at it. I could draw, not doodles. I could look at a room and see how it should be, the proportions, the light, the way a space could hold a person. My art teacher, a woman named Ms. Whitcomb, told me once that I had the kind of spatial instinct that design firms hunt for. She wrote me a recommendation for a summer program and helped me put together a portfolio. I carried it home like it was made of glass. My father looked at it for maybe 4 seconds. "Drawing pictures isn't a career, Marlo," he said. "It's a hobby." He set it on the counter and never mentioned it again. I found it 2 weeks later in the recycling bin under a stack of grocery flyers, the corners already soft from a spill. I dried it out page by page on my bedroom floor and put it in a folder under my mattress, and I told myself that someday the folder would matter more than his 4 seconds. It did. It just took a while. But the college money, that was supposed to be the one thing that was equal. My grandparents on my mother's side had opened 2 custodial accounts. One the year Bryce was born, one the year I was born. $182,000 in each, built over 18 years of steady deposits and patient compounding. My father announced it at Thanksgiving when I was 15, standing at the head of the table with a wine glass like he was delivering an earnings report. "Both my kids have their futures paid for," he said. 182 each. Nobody touches it. The whole table clapped. My aunt, my uncle, the cousins, all of them. Afterward, I stood in the living room and counted the framed photos on the wall. Everyone was Bryce. His trophy, his certificate, his homecoming picture. I had exactly one, tucked in the corner by the thermostat. A Christmas photo where half my face was hidden behind my father's shoulder. And I remember thinking, even then, the money is the only thing that's actually fair. I was wrong about that, but I was right that it mattered. There was one person who made me feel like I was not invisible, and that was my grandmother, Vivienne. She had been a seamstress for 40 years, ran an alterations shop out of her garage in Newington until her hands got too stiff to hold a needle straight. She had a way of looking at you while you talked, like you were the only channel worth watching. Nobody else in my family did that for me. Grandma Vivienne taught me to sketch, not the art school kind, the practical kind. She'd lay a pattern flat on her cutting table, and I'd trace it freehand while she pinned. "Your hands in your head, sweetheart," she used to say. "Nobody can ever repossess those." I didn't know then how many times I would need those words, or how literally the world would test them. She used to pay me $1 an hour to sort her button jars by color and size, and at the end of an afternoon she'd count the coins into my palm and say, "That's yours. You earned it. Don't let anyone tell you what to do with money you earned." It was the only allowance I ever got. I still have one of those button jars. It sits on a shelf in my office where clients think it's decoration. She died the spring I turned 16. Ovarian cancer, fast and without mercy. My father did not go to the funeral. He said he had a conflict, which in his language meant he didn't think his wife's mother had earned a personal day. My mother stood at the casket alone. I stood beside her. Bryce didn't come either. He was at a fraternity event. A week before she passed, my grandmother pulled me close in her hospital room. Her voice was almost gone, but her grip was iron. "I put something aside for you," she said. "Not much, but it's yours and no one else's. A man named Franklin Ross will find you when you're ready." I thought she meant a quilt or jewelry. I was 16. I didn't know what a trust was. After the funeral, I found a small wooden box she'd left me. Inside was her sewing kit, a measuring tape worn soft at the edges, and a folded slip of paper with a name and a phone number. Franklin Ross, Esquire. I tucked it behind my school ID in my wallet, and I did not think about it again for 2 years. Bryce came home the fall of my senior year, like a man who had found religion, except his gospel was money, and his prophet was himself. He'd been at a state university for 3 years, and his grade point average was somewhere around a 2.3, which I only knew because I'd overheard him arguing with the registrar on the phone. But to hear him tell it at dinner, he was networking, building a personal brand, laying groundwork for something big. My father ate every word of it like communion. One Saturday in early March, he showed up in a blazer I'd never seen, the price tag still hanging from the inside seam like he wanted someone to notice. He had 8 double-spaced pages in a plastic binder. He called it his business plan. I was at the sink washing the breakfast dishes when he sat across from my father and started his pitch. He needed an MBA, top program, then seed money for a startup, something in digital consulting, whatever that meant. Total investment, he said, roughly $182,000. I turned off the faucet. "Dad," he said, leaning back with one ankle on his knee, "let's be real. You've got 2 education funds sitting there. I need one. And Marlo, come on, what's she gonna do with it?" "She draws pictures," he said it. The way you'd describe a toddler's hobby. Not cruel exactly, just dismissive, like I wasn't 12 feet away with dishwater running down my arms. And my father, the man who had stood at Thanksgiving and promised the whole family that each of his kids had $182,000 waiting, looked at that plastic binder, nodded slowly and said, "You might be onto something." He did not look at me once. They waited a week to tell me, though I suspect that had more to do with paperwork than with courtesy. It was a Sunday. The kitchen smelled like coffee and toast, and the light came through the window over the sink in that flat, honest way that makes everything look a little too real. My father sat at the head of the table. Bryce was beside him, legs crossed, sipping from one of those oversized mugs my father had bought for $28 apiece. Though God forbid I ask for a $10 set of colored pencils. "Sit down, Marlo," my father said. He didn't ease into it. Clifford Larkin never eased into anything. "I've made a decision about the education accounts. Your brother needs the capital for his MBA. It's a real opportunity, and I won't let it slip. I'm consolidating both funds under his name. Both funds. All of it. Your brother has real potential," he went on, straightening a napkin like he was closing a deal. "You should learn a trade. There's good money in it. Nothing wrong with that." I looked at my mother. She was standing at the sink, both hands gripping the counter's edge, her back half turned, staring at the floor tile like she was trying to memorize the grout. "Mom," I said, "nothing. Not a word, not a glance. Just the refrigerator humming and my brother slurping coffee like it was any other Sunday." "Your mother agrees," my father said, and something between my mother and me died right there on that kitchen floor. No funeral, no flowers, just silence and the smell of burnt toast. I looked at my father, I looked at my brother. and I said one word, "Okay." Then I pushed back my chair, stood up, and walked upstairs. That one word cost me $182,000. What I did over the next 48 hours would end up worth a great deal more. I didn't leave that night. I know that's the version people expect. The slammed door, the car peeling out while the music swells. What actually happened was math. I had 2 final exams left, 2 days. If I walked out before graduation, I'd lose the only credential I had. And without a diploma, I wouldn't even qualify for community college. So I sat in my attic room and did the most practical thing I had ever done. I opened my laptop and made a list of rooms for rent in New Haven. I sorted them by price, then by distance from a bus line, then by whether the listing mentioned a deposit I couldn't afford. I made a second list of coffee shops that were hiring. I made a third list of everything I owned that could be sold. That night I learned that panic, if you point it at a spreadsheet, turns into a plan. Monday I aced my English final. Tuesday art history, the easiest 3 hours of my life. Wednesday afternoon I walked across the gym stage, in a navy cap and gown, shook the principal's hand, and took my diploma. No one from my family was in the audience. My parents were at my brother's college across the state for some end-of-year reception for graduating seniors. Bryce didn't actually graduate that semester, but my parents didn't know that yet. I walked out into the June sun, and I did not go home. I'd packed the night before. 1 backpack, 3 changes of clothes, my laptop, a charger, my grandmother's wooden sewing box, and the folded paper with Franklin Ross's number still in my wallet. That was everything I owned. My entire net worth was $295 in a savings account, tied to a debit card with a cracked screen protector. I left a note on the kitchen table, the same oak table where my grandmother had taught me to trace patterns and where my father had signed away my future. "I'm leaving. Please don't look for me. You already made your choice." I called a car, got in, and watched the white shutters of Sycamore Ridge shrink in the rear window. $295, a diploma, a dead woman's sewing box, and a phone number I'd never dialed. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and nobody could repossess it. New Haven in summer is loud and humid and completely indifferent to your problems, which, when you are 18 and running on adrenaline and spite, is exactly what you need. I found a room in a 3-bedroom on Wiley Avenue, $725 a month, shared bathroom, 2 roommates I'd never met. One was a nursing student named Tamsin who worked overnights. The other was a guy named Deshaun who played bass in a cover band and was never awake before noon. Nobody asked why I was there. Nobody asked about my family. I liked that. I got a barista job on Chapel Street within the week, minimum wage plus tips, and enrolled at Capital Community College for the fall, graphic and spatial design. The tuition was manageable, barely, if I picked up extra shifts. Those first months I ate a lot of things that came in a plastic sleeve and cost less than $1. I learned which grocery store marked down bread on Sunday nights, and which bakery near campus put its unsold muffins in a bag by the back door before closing. I got very rich in small victories, a good tip jar on a rainy Tuesday, a professor who let me submit a project late without asking why, a bus that came right when I needed it. When you have almost nothing, the world sorts itself into things that help you and things that don't, and you stop wasting energy on anything in the second column. I didn't know it then, but that was the first real lesson of running a business. There was one night, about 6 weeks in, when it almost broke me. My debit card got declined at the pharmacy for a $12 prescription, and I stood at the counter, doing the math of which I could skip, the medicine or dinner, while a line formed behind me. I put the medicine back and walked home in the rain, and sat on the bottom bunk, and thought, very calmly, that I could just go back, that a warm attic and a cold family was still a roof. Tamsin came off her overnight shift at 7s the next morning and found me still sitting there, and she didn't ask what was wrong. She just made 2 bowls of instant oatmeal and put one in my hands and said, "My first year of nursing school, I lived on rice and stubbornness. You're going to be fine. Eat." I've never forgotten that. Sometimes surviving is just someone handing you a bowl and refusing to let you drown in front of them. I paid her back 100 times over in the years after, but I never told her that oatmeal was the thing that kept me from making the phone call. Some debts you carry on purpose. It was 2 weeks before my father called, not to check on me, not to ask where I was sleeping, but to scold me. I didn't pick up, so he left a voicemail. "You're being dramatic, Marlo. This is exactly the behavior I'm talking about. Come home and we'll look into a cosmetology program, something realistic." He left 3 more messages that month, each shorter and angrier than the last. My mother called once, late, whispering, which meant my father was in the next room. Sweetheart, I'm worried about you. Your father just wants what's best. Please come home. We can figure this out. Figure what out, Mom, I said. He gave away my money. A pause. Then, your father knows best, honey. Just come home. I hung up, and I understood with a clarity that felt like cold water that my mother was never going to choose me. Not because she didn't love me, but because she had spent 25 years letting Clifford Larkin make every decision in her life, and she no longer knew how to stop. That was the night I deleted the word home from my contacts. Meanwhile, my brother posted in the family group chat one message with a laughing emoji. Guess the artist couldn't handle the real world. I took a screenshot, muted the chat, and went back to studying. That same week on his page, a rooftop bar in Manhattan, a bottle of something expensive, the caption MBA Life, paid for with every cent of my $182,000. I closed the app and opened my textbook. 3 months in, I was running on 4 hours of sleep, black coffee, and a stubbornness I'd inherited from a woman who hemmed wedding dresses in a garage until her knuckle swelled shut. I was digging through my bag for a pen one night when my hand brushed the wooden box. I opened it the way you open something sacred. The measuring tape, the needles in their felt case, and underneath, the folded paper. Franklin Ross, Esquire. A phone number with a Newington area code. I'd been carrying it for 2 years and never called. It had always felt like something for later, for some vague emergency I couldn't picture. But sitting on that bunk with $214 in my account and a tuition bill due in 6 weeks, I realized this was the emergency. I called the next morning. Franklin Ross answered on the second ring, a calm and unhurried voice, the kind you develop after 40 years of reading legal documents to grieving families. He told me he had been trying to reach me, that he'd mailed 2 letters to the house in Simsbury over the past 2 years. I never got them, I said. A long pause on his end. I see. We both understood what that meant. My father had intercepted them. He asked me to come to his office. I took 2 buses. It was a small practice, just him and a paralegal, in a brick building with law books on every surface, and a brass lamp older than I was. He sat me down and explained what my grandmother had done. Vivienne had set up a revocable trust 4 years before she died, $14,500 from her own savings, the sole beneficiary being me, and structured to transfer when I turned 18, and made contact with the trustee. He was that trustee. She told me you'd call eventually, he said. She just wasn't sure when. He slid a check across the desk, $14,500, and beside it a copy of the trust with my grandmother's signature at the bottom, thin and shaky but deliberate, every letter intentional. I held that paper, and, for the first time since I'd left Simsbury, I cried. Not because of the money, because someone had planned for me. Someone had sat down with a lawyer and said, "This is for Marlo, and nobody else gets to touch it." He told me she'd come in the year she was diagnosed, before she told anyone in the family, and that she'd been very specific about one thing. She said her granddaughter would try to give it away, or refuse it out of pride, he said, and I was to make sure that didn't happen. She knew you, he added, and I had to look out the window for a second so he wouldn't see my face. But Franklin wasn't finished. "There's something else you should know," he said, and opened a folder. "Your custodial account, the $182,000. As the beneficiary, you're entitled to the records, so I requested them." He turned the folder toward me. Inside was a printout, an email from my father to the bank, dated the 14th of March, instructing a full withdrawal and transfer of the custodial funds into a new account in my brother's name. 4 sentences. No mention of my education. No mention of me at all, except as an account number. Under Connecticut law, Franklin explained, a custodian of one of these accounts has a fiduciary duty to use the assets for the benefit of the minor. That's you. What your father did isn't just unfair, Marlo. It's a breach of that duty. You have legal standing to pursue recovery. My stomach dropped. So I can get it back? He was honest with me. You can file. But your father would need the assets to return, and litigation takes time and money you may not have. I can't promise you anything. I sat a long time staring at that email, my father's name, the date, the amount, cold and transactional, like moving inventory between warehouses. Then I folded it, put it in the envelope with a check, and said, "I'm not going to sue him." Franklin raised an eyebrow. "I don't want his money anymore," I said. "I want my own." He nodded slowly, the way someone does when they respect a decision they might not have made themselves. "The statute of limitations on a breach like this in Connecticut runs 6 years, he said. "Keep the copies. I'll keep the originals here, the email, the bank correspondence, the trust, all of it. If you ever change your mind, the door stays open. Take copies, never the originals," he added, sliding a second folder toward me. Originals leave in a lawyer's safe. Copies live in your desk. That way, nobody can ever make the proof disappear again. It was the most useful sentence anyone had ever said to me, and I have followed it in every part of my life since. I want to be honest about what those first 2 years actually looked like, because people imagine a montage, inspirational music, the girl at the desk, everything golden. It wasn't like that. It was unglamorous and exhausting, and there were weeks where the only thing that kept me moving was the fear of proving my father right. I used the $14,500 like wet water in a desert, a year of community college tuition, a refurbished computer, and a student design software license. The rest I stretched across rent gaps and bus fare, and the electric bill when Deshaun forgot his share for the 3rd month running. I kept the money in a separate account I mentally labeled Vivienne, and every time I had to take from it, I wrote down what for and why in a notebook, because it felt like spending someone's faith in me, and I refused to be careless with it. I graduated Capital with a 3.94, top of my cohort, and that earned me a transfer scholarship to Central Connecticut State. Not a full ride, but enough to cover most of it. I cobbled the rest together with a campus job and freelance logo work at $10 an hour, sometimes less. The freelance work taught me things school couldn't. I built a logo for a woman opening a bakery who paid me in installments and once in banana bread. I designed a menu for a taco place whose owner argued about every font and then hired me twice more because, he said, I was the only designer who argued back with reasons. I learned to write a contract, to ask for half up front, to say no to the clients who smelled like my father, the ones who wanted to pay in exposure and treated my time like a favor they were doing me. Every small job was a brick, and I was too busy laying them to notice. I was building a wall between myself and the girl at the kitchen table. It was during my first semester at Central that I walked into an internship interview and met Paloma Iverson. Paloma was the creative director of a small interior design firm in Hartford, 12 people, mostly residential, nothing flashy. She was around 40, with reading glasses permanently pushed up on her head and a habit of saying exactly what she thought, which in a world full of Clifford Larkins was the most refreshing thing I had ever encountered. She flipped through my portfolio in silence for what felt like 10 minutes. Then she looked up. "Who trained you?" she asked. "My grandmother and the internet," I said. She almost smiled. "Your spatial work is raw, but it's exceptional," she said. "I don't say that often." She offered me the internship, 20 hours a week, and I said yes before she finished the sentence. Somewhere on the other side of the state, my brother, funded by my $182,000, was living a very different version of potential. I wasn't checking his page anymore, not on purpose, but Tamsin followed some mutual acquaintance and things filtered through. Bryce had quit his MBA after 1 year, just quit, taken the remaining money, and pivoted to a startup, some vague digital consulting thing that, as far as anyone could tell, consisted of a shared desk and a profile full of buzzwords. He leased a BMW. He rented a room in Manhattan. He posted from rooftops with captions about building an empire one connection at a time. My father told anyone who'd listen that his son was an entrepreneur in New York. And not once, according to my Aunt Bernadette, who was my only remaining thread to that family, did anyone ask about me. Paloma said something to me at the end of my first month. We were cleaning up after a client meeting, rolling blueprints, and she stopped and looked at me the way my grandmother used to. "I don't know what you're running from, Marlo," she said, "but whatever it is, keep running. You're going somewhere." She didn't know the half of it, but she saw enough. By the start of my 3rd year, I had something I'd never had before, a life that was entirely mine. I was 21, at Central full-time, carrying a double load, working 20 hours a week for Paloma. My apartment was 400 square feet in a neighborhood called Frog Hollow, nothing glamorous, but the one window faced east, and I'd pushed my drafting table against it, so the morning light hit my work just right. The walls were covered in mood boards and fabric swatches and color studies. It looked like the home of someone building something, because it was. That's when my father decided he needed me back. Not because he missed me, because the Kavanaghs, our next-door neighbors of 15 years, had started asking questions. "Where's Marlo these days, Clifford? Haven't seen her at church in ages." My father could not tolerate a question he didn't have a polished answer to. A daughter who had vanished was a crack in the facade, and Clifford Larkin did not do cracks. The call came through my mother, of course. Her voice was thin and rehearsed. "Your father would like you to come home for Thanksgiving. The Kavanaghs are joining us, and some of your father's colleagues. It would mean a lot." Translation: Your absence has become inconvenient. I appreciate the invitation, Mom, but I have plans. A shuffle on the line, then my father, sharp and sudden, listening the whole time. You're embarrassing this family, Marlo. People are asking where you are. What am I supposed to tell them? And there it was. Not, are you safe? Not, how are you? But, what do I tell people? Tell them the truth, Dad. Don't be smart with me. I'm not coming home to be a prop in a photo, I said. You made a decision 3 years ago. I made mine. He hung up, and I stood in my little apartment with my hand still against my ear and my heart hammering. Not because I was scared, but because for the first time I had said no to my father and the sky had not fallen. Within a week, the damage control began. My father sent a group email to every aunt, uncle, and cousin, and the half of my mother's family that still deferred to him. The subject line was family update. I know the exact wording because my Aunt Bernadette forwarded it to me without a single comment, which was her quiet way of saying, you should see this. Paulette and I want to address Marlo's situation, it read. As some of you may have noticed, she has chosen to distance herself from the family. We have made every effort to support her and keep the door open, but she has refused. She is going through a difficult period and has frankly some personal issues we'd rather not discuss in detail. We ask for your understanding and your prayers. Personal issues. That's what he called it. Not, I took her college fund. Not, I told her to learn a trade while I bankrolled her brother. Personal issues. The kind of vague, loaded phrase that lets everyone fill in the worst blank they can imagine and lets the storyteller come out clean. The calls started within days. A cousin texted that she was praying for me. An uncle left a voicemail about getting right with God. And my Aunt Bernadette, the only one with the sense to actually dig, called me directly. Honey, are you okay? Your dad says you're struggling. Aunt Bernadette, I said, I love you, but ask Dad what happened to my college fund, and then decide who's struggling. She went quiet. I could hear her recalculating everything she thought she knew. She did ask him. She told me later. His answer was, that's between me and my children, which is what people say when the truth makes them look bad. I couldn't fight on every front. I was 21, working and studying, and barely keeping my head above water. So I did what I'd done since I was 12. I put my head down and kept working. But I saved that email. I saved my aunt's forward with the timestamp and the full list of names it had gone to. I didn't know when I'd need it. I only knew that a man who rewrites history once will do it again, and next time I wanted the receipts in a folder. Franklin's rule had already sunk in. Keep the copy. Let the proof live in more than one place. Because the thing about people like my father is that they count on there being no record, on it being their word in a warm kitchen against yours. Take that away and half their power goes with it. My brother called on a Thursday night, 8 months after that blow-up, the first time I'd heard his voice in over 2 years. Hey, sis. Warm, casual, like nothing had happened. Bryce, as I said. Look, Dad told me about the whole Thanksgiving thing. I think you're overreacting. It was just money, you know? We're family. Families figure this stuff out. Just money. $182,000. My education, my future, my grandmother's legacy. Just money. It was $182,000, Bryce, I said. Mine. Okay, sure, technically, he said, but Dad did what he thought was best, and honestly, I needed it more. You always land on your feet, Marlo. You're scrappy like that. Scrappy. The word people use when they want to compliment your suffering while taking credit for causing it. I let the silence sit. His tone thinned and sharpened. Fine, be like that, but I'll be straight with you. If you keep this grudge going and it gets back to Dad's people, if you start ruining his reputation over some bank account, I'll make sure everyone knows you left because you couldn't handle not being the favorite. I'll make that story stick. There it was. The real Bryce. Not the charming big brother, not the family peacemaker. The same kid who'd sat at that table and said she draws pictures while I stood 12 feet away with dishwater on my arms. Bryce, I said, and my voice was so steady it surprised even me. I'm going to say this once. Don't call me again unless it's to apologize. With a check. And even then, call a lawyer first. I hung up, my hand was shaking. My face was not. That was the last time my brother and I spoke for 2 years and 4 months, until the morning he walked into my office. The thing about building a life from nothing is that nothing keeps trying to remind you where you came from. At the end of my 3rd year, I'd been running full speed for almost 30 months. And then in a single week, 2 things happened at once. My biggest freelance client, a boutique hotel group I'd been doing branding for, froze their entire marketing budget. Contract canceled, $1,400 a month gone. And the tuition bill for my final semester arrived, $4,200 due in 30 days, my scholarship covering the rest, but this chunk mine to pay. My savings account had $611 in it. I sat in the old car Paloma had lent me semi-permanently in a drugstore parking lot at 11 at night and did the math on the back of a receipt. Every way I ran it, I came up short. If I didn't pay, I lost my final semester. No degree. 3 years of grinding reduced to a transcript that said incomplete. And for the first time since that kitchen table, I heard my father's voice in my head. Not a memory. Worse, a verdict. Maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't built for this. Maybe the girl who draws pictures really didn't have real potential. Maybe I should have gone home and enrolled in that program and married someone appropriate and hosted dinners for the neighbors until I turned into my mother. I picked up my phone and scrolled to where home used to be. I still knew the number. My thumb hovered over the keypad. I imagined the call, the relief in my father's voice that would sound so much like winning, the way he'd tell the story afterward, that I'd come crawling back, that he'd been right all along, that the trade he'd wanted for me was the trade the world had wanted too. I imagined becoming a footnote in the legend of Clifford Larkin's good judgment. Then I looked at the passenger seat, where the wooden box sat, because I kept it in the car the way some people keep something holy on the rearview mirror. The measuring tape, the empty fold where Franklin Ross's number used to live. Your hands in your head, sweetheart. Nobody can repossess those. I put the phone down. I didn't call home. I called Paloma. She picked up on the first ring near midnight, like she'd been expecting it, which, knowing Paloma, she probably had. She'd watched me get thinner. She'd noticed the circles under my eyes. She never narrated my struggle back to me, because she respected people too much for that. But she watched, always. "Paloma, I'm sorry to call so late," I said. "Do you have any overflow projects?" "Anything at all. I'll take whatever you've got." I want to be clear about what I did not say. I did not say I need money. I did not say please help me. I wasn't looking for charity. I was looking for work. There's a difference and it matters. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you. I'm leaving the firm." My stomach dropped, the one stable thing in my professional life gone. "I'm starting my own studio," she went on. "Residential and commercial. I've been planning it for 6 months, and I need a junior designer, full-time, salaried. It pays enough to finish your degree, if that's what you're worried about." I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and closed my eyes, not because I was breaking down, but because for the first time in 3 years the math worked. "Paloma, why me?" "Because I saw your portfolio update last month," she said. "That hotel lobby concept? Marlo, that's not junior level work. That's principal level. You just don't know it yet." She didn't rescue me. She hired me. She made a business decision based on 2 years of what she'd watched me produce. I didn't get a handout. I got an offer because I'd earned it. I started that Monday. Design work by day, classes 3 evenings a week, and Saturday mornings, 6 hours of sleep if I was lucky. It was the hardest year of my life. It was also the year everything turned. My first real project at the new studio was a farm-to-table restaurant a young couple was opening in a gutted hardware store downtown. They had almost no budget, and a landlord breathing down their necks, and every other designer they'd talked to had tried to talk them out of their own idea. I didn't. I sat in the empty shell of that building for 3 hours with a sketch pad and listened to them describe the meal they wanted people to remember, and then I designed around the memory instead of the square footage. I kept the old tin ceiling and the exposed brick because their story was in it, and I built the whole light plan around the front window so that at dusk the room glowed like something warm you'd want to walk toward from across the street. The place got written up in the paper the month it opened. The photographer used my window at dusk for the cover of the food section. That one project brought us 4 more, and I learned the thing that would define my whole career, that the best design isn't the most expensive. It's the one that sees the person and builds for who they actually are. My father's spent 18 years not seeing me. It turned out to be the one skill I had that money couldn't buy and he couldn't give away. My Aunt Bernadette called on a Sunday in late October of my 4th year. She delivered bad news like a weather report, factual and measured with just enough warmth to let you know she cared. "Bryce moved back home," she said. I set my pencil down. "His startup didn't make it, whatever it was," she went on. "The BMW got repossessed last month. He's back in his old bedroom." I didn't feel triumph. I want to be honest about that. What I felt was a strange, hollow ache, the kind you get when something you predicted finally happens, and you realize you'd been hoping you were wrong. "And Dad?" "Your father refinanced the house," she said. "Pulled from his retirement, put another 30 or 40,000 into Bryce to get him back on his feet. And your mother started working, cashier at the grocery store on the avenue. First job she's had since before you were born. My mother, Paulette Larkin, scanning groceries at 51 because her husband had poured every dollar the family had into a son who couldn't hold a job, couldn't finish a degree, and couldn't tell the truth about either. Does Dad talk about me? I asked. I don't know why I asked. I think some part of you never stops being the kid at the kitchen table, looking at their father and hoping. No, honey, she said gently. He tells people your brother is regrouping, that the market will turn. He doesn't mention you at all. I picked up my pencil and went back to work. While my father watched his investment get towed out of the driveway, I was quietly getting ready to sign my first lease, not for an apartment, for an office. I thought about the repossession for a long time that night, the tow truck, the plates, my grandmother's voice. They can take the car, I thought. They can take the house. They can never take your hands and your head. I graduated from Central Connecticut State on a Saturday in May, magna cum laude. The auditorium was full of families, mothers with bouquets, fathers holding up phones, little siblings squirming in folding chairs. My row had 2 seats reserved under Larkin, both empty. Paloma sat 3 rows back in a navy blazer with her reading glasses on her head, and when they called Marlo Vivian Larkin, magna cum laude, she stood up and clapped like she was trying to fill the silence my family had left. It was enough. 6 months later, we made it official. Her client list was growing faster than she could handle, and the work I was producing had started bringing in its own referrals. She sat me down one evening after the last person left and said, I want your name on the door. Iverson and Larkin Design Studio. She'd already had the partnership drafted, 51% hers, 49% mine. Fair, given she brought the capital and the reputation. I brought my portfolio, my client relationships, and $9,500 I'd saved over 18 months. We signed in front of a notary on a Tuesday. Within 6 months, we'd outgrown the space and hired 3 people, then 7, then 12. Paloma took the high-end residential work. I built out a consulting arm, corporate spaces, restaurant concepts, boutique hotels. The day I saw my last name on a glass door I owned, not inherited, not borrowed, not given, I stood there for 5 full minutes, not to admire it, to believe it. By my 5th year, I was 23, and my life looked nothing like anything anyone in that house on Sycamore Ridge had predicted. We'd moved into a pre-war office tower in downtown Hartford, renovated top to bottom, the kind of address that makes people take you seriously before you open your mouth. We had the entire 14th floor, 40 employees, glass-walled offices, a design lab, and a presentation suite with a walnut table that seated 12. Our revenue had tripled in 18 months. My corner office had a view of the river. On the oak desk sat 2 things, a framed photograph of my grandmother Vivienne, and the wooden sewing box, lid open, the measuring tape still coiled inside, and on the shelf behind me, 1 glass jar of buttons, no other family photos, not one. Then, in early January, an email arrived from the Constitution State Business Review. They were launching their annual 30 Under 30 awards for young business leaders across the state. And I'd been nominated. The gala was in March, 300 attendees, media coverage, the kind of visibility my father would have killed for my brother to have. I read it 3 times, then called Paloma. You deserve this, she said. Don't you dare turn it down. I didn't. I accepted, and I started drafting a speech. I planned to thank Paloma, my professors, and the woman who gave me my first $14,500 and my first lesson in believing. What I didn't plan for was that the Business Review publishes its nominee profiles online 2 weeks before the gala, with photographs and full names, and that Simsbury is only 22 miles from downtown Hartford. It was Kevin Kavanaugh who lit the match. Kevin, the neighbor's son, the kid who used to throw a football with my brother in the backyard, had moved to Hartford after college and worked in commercial real estate. He saw the article the day it went live. He saw the name, the photo, a clean professional headshot, the kind of image my father would have framed in the living room if it had belonged to Bryce. Kevin forwarded it to his mother with a note. Isn't this the Larkins' daughter? Small world. Sheila Kavanaugh texted my father that evening. Congratulations, Clifford. Saw Marlo in the Business Review. What an achievement. You must be so proud. I know what happened next because my Aunt Bernadette pieced it together later from what my mother let slip. My father opened the link on the old tablet he kept on the kitchen counter and read the whole thing in silence. Co-founder of a design studio, 40 employees, major clients, revenue growth, the 30 Under 30 nomination, a quote from Paloma calling me one of the most gifted spatial designers she'd met in 20 years. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't say he was proud. He said to my mother, who was standing at the stove. She got lucky. Design is a bubble. It won't last. And my mother, for the first time in 25 years, did not nod along. Clifford, she said quietly. She built that without a penny from us. He didn't answer. He set the tablet down and left the room. My brother was upstairs in his childhood bedroom at 26, surrounded by rejection emails and $71,000 in credit card debt. He saw the article that night and read it twice. Then he came downstairs and said the only honest thing I believe he said all year. We should visit her. Maybe she can help. My father's first instinct was to refuse. He was not going to go begging at his daughter's office. In his world, children came to fathers, not the other way around. But my brother knew which lever to pull. Dad, think about it, he said. If people find out your daughter is this successful and you're not even in contact, that looks worse. Way worse than anything Marlowe could say. He was right, and they both knew it. This was never about reconnection. It was about optics. My father needed to be seen as the patriarch of a family that included a successful daughter, not the man whose daughter had succeeded in spite of him. They agreed to drive to Hartford. No call first, no appointment, just a surprise so my father could control the narrative. Walk in, shake hands, maybe get a photo for the living room wall. They left on a Tuesday morning, my father in his best suit, the navy one, 15 years old, a little tight across the shoulders now. My brother in wrinkled khakis and a polo that had seen better days. My mother in the back seat, clutching her old handbag, eyes red before they'd even merged onto the highway. 3 people and a stack of my brother's credit card statements, headed for an office they had never been invited to. That Tuesday, I was in early, 8 in the morning, the 14th floor, quiet. Just me and the hum of the vents and the pale March light through the tall windows. I had my gala speech open on my laptop, a draft I'd been tightening for 2 weeks, the ceremony 4 days away. I'd rewritten the middle section a dozen times, the part about my grandmother. I want to thank the woman who gave me my first investment, $14,500 in a sewing box, and taught me that real potential is not something someone else gets to decide for you. That line I had nailed. It was the next part that kept tripping me, how much to say about him, how close to the bone to cut without making the night about him. I looked out at the skyline, the gold dome of the Capitol, the river catching light, a city that owed me nothing and had given me everything anyway. I hadn't thought about my father in weeks, and that, I realized, was the real victory. Not the office, not the title, not the view. The fact that Clifford Larkin no longer lived rent-free in my head. Then the intercom buzzed. And now you know exactly where the story began, with 3 people in my lobby who said they were family. I sat with it for 10 seconds, 10 full seconds of silence, my fingertips against the edge of my speech, the intercom light blinking green. I could have said no. I could have told my receptionist I was in a meeting, that Miss Larkin wasn't available. Please leave a card. Part of me wanted to, the 18-year-old at the kitchen table, who wanted to lock the door and never open it. But the 23-year-old who had built this floor from nothing knew something the girl didn't. Running from them gave them power. Meeting them on my ground took it back. Send them ups, I said. I straightened my blazer, pulled my chair to the desk, opened a blank document so the screen wasn't showing my speech, and waited. The elevator chimed through the glass. I didn't go out to meet them. I stayed exactly where I was while my receptionist walked them past the reception desk with its brass logo, past the open studio where 40 people sat at their stations, the morning light streaming in, the whole space humming with competence. My father walked first, the navy suit pulling across his shoulders, his shoes polished but the same wingtips he'd worn to a cousin's wedding years ago. Behind him, my brother, khakis wrinkled at the knee, hands in his pockets like a teenager sent to the principal. And behind them, my mother, smaller than I remembered, holding her handbag with both hands, her eyes already red. They walked past 40 people who didn't know them, in a building with their daughter's name on the wall, through a space that existed because I had refused the life they chose for me. My receptionist opened the conference room, glass walls, walnut table, an enormous display screen, and a view you could charge admission for. Ms. Larkin will be with you shortly, she said. I gave it 2 minutes, not to be petty, but because I needed to breathe. Then I picked up a legal pad and the good pen Paloma had given me the day we signed, and walked in. My mother saw me first. She made a sound that wasn't a word or a cry, but something between the two, and her knees actually buckled. She caught the edge of the table with one hand, and my father's arm with the other. He steadied her, but his face, I will never forget his face. It was the look of a man who had walked into a building expecting to find a hobby and found an empire instead. My brother just stared at the logo, at the table, at me. His mouth opened and opened again, and nothing came out. And I looked at all three of them with the exact expression I'd give a walk-in client who hadn't made an appointment. Professional, courteous, empty of anything personal. "Please, sit down," I said. "Can I get you water or coffee?" They sat. My father took the head of the table out of habit, then seemed to realize it wasn't his table and shifted awkwardly to the side. My mother took the chair nearest the door, like she might need an escape route. My brother sat between them, arms crossed, eyes still appraising the room like real estate. Nobody took the coffee. My father spoke first, of course. "You've done well for yourself, Marlo," he said, with a slow nod, the kind he used to give my brother's report cards, like he was grading me. "I always said you were resourceful. Resourceful, not talented, not brilliant. Resourceful, the word you use for someone who survives despite the odds you stacked against them." I let the silence sit until it turned uncomfortable. Then, "Thank you. Now, how can I help you today?" He blinked. He'd expected warmth, maybe tears. The prodigal daughter grateful to see her family after 5 years. What he got was a conference room and a question he'd have to answer, honestly. "We're here because we're family," he said, leaning forward, adjusting his cuffs like he was chairing a meeting. "We've let too much time pass. Your mother and I want to reconnect, put things behind us." My mother nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I set my pen down on the legal pad. I didn't write anything. "I appreciate you coming," I said. Then my brother cleared his throat, uncrossed his arms, planted his elbows on the walnut table, and tried on his old charm. "Marlo, I could actually use some advice. Business stuff. I've got a few things in the works, and I thought maybe you could take a look, give me your perspective." A few things in the works. $71,000 of debt and a childhood bedroom was a few things in the works. I looked at my brother the way Paloma looks at a concept that misses the brief. "Bryce, are you a client?" He frowned. "What? If this is a business consultation, I'll have the front desk schedule you," I said. "Our rate is $375 an hour." The room went very still. My father's jaw tightened, and a vein I remembered from childhood, the one above his left temple that showed up before he raised his voice, pulsed once. I placed a business card on the table between us. Marlo Larkin, co-founder. Phone, email. No family crest, no shared history, just the facts. My father looked at it. He didn't pick it up. "I'm happy to help," I said, "but I need to understand the capacity. Are you here as family or as a business inquiry? Because as family, we haven't spoken in 5 years." I paused, and that wasn't my choice. The mask came off. He pushed back from the table, both hands flat on the walnut, and every year of carefully maintained composure cracked down the center. "Enough with the corporate act, Marlo. We're your parents. We drove 2 hours to see you." "You drove 2 hours," I said. "That's more effort than you made in 5 years." His face flushed, the vein throbbing now. "I made a decision for this family's," he said. "I did what I thought was right. I looked at 2 kids and I put the money where it had the best chance of paying off. And look at you. You got over it. You're fine. Got over it. Like $182,000 was a cold I should have walked off like a stubbed toe. You took $182,000 with my name on it," I said, and my voice did not waver. I'd practiced this sentence in my head for 5 years, not for this moment, but for myself, for the version of me who needed to hear it said out loud. "You transferred it to Bryce without my consent. That wasn't a family decision, Dad. That was a legal breach of your fiduciary duty as the custodian of that account. I chose not to sue you. That does not mean I forgot." His face drained, not red anymore, white. The color of a man who has just learned that the person he dismissed understands exactly what he did, with the legal vocabulary to prove it. "How?" he started. "I had a lawyer explain it to me," I said. "The same lawyer my grandmother appointed to manage the trust she left me. The one whose letters you intercepted." Dead silence. My mother's head snapped toward him. "What letters?" she whispered. He didn't answer. My brother, who had been shrinking into his chair by the inch, leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the charm entirely gone. In its place was something I recognized. Desperation. "Marlo, look, I'm in a tough spot. I owe about 70 grand, mostly credit cards. If you could just lend me something, a bridge, just enough to." No, the word landed like a stone in water. No echo, no negotiation. "Come on," he said, his voice cracking. "We're blood. Blood didn't stop you from taking my future, Bryce. And it won't make me fund yours." He looked to our father the way he always did, for backup, for reinforcement. But our father was staring at the table, jaw clenched, still processing the phrase fiduciary duty, and the ghost of 2 letters he'd thrown in the trash. Then my mother broke. Not the quiet way she used to, crying at the sink and blaming the water. This was a woman finally looking at the full cost of her silence. "Marlo," she said, her voice splintering. "Please, I know I should have said something. I was standing right there. I saw what he did, and I was scared. Your father, I didn't know how to." "Mom," I said gently, not warm, not cold, the way you speak to someone telling you something you already know. "I know you were scared, but you were the adult. I was 18. I needed one person in that house to stand up for me, just one, and you chose silence." She pressed both hands over her mouth and sobbed, the kind of crying that comes from a place so deep it makes no sound at first. In the quiet, I reached into the folder I'd carried in, the copy I kept in my desk, the one I hadn't opened in 3 years but never threw away. I placed a single sheet on the table in front of my father. The email, his email, dated the 14th of March, 5 years ago, from Clifford Larkin to the bank, requesting a full withdrawal and transfer of the custodial funds from the account of Marlo Larkin to a new account for Bryce Larkin. 4 sentences. No mention of my education, no mention of my future, just an account number and an instruction. "This is what you gave me, Dad," I said, "a withdrawal form. Everything else I gave myself." His hand moved toward the paper, then stopped. He didn't pick it up. He didn't need to. He knew what it was. "And this is only a copy," I said. "The originals are in my attorney's safe, along with the record of the letters you intercepted. In case anyone was thinking of making paper disappear again." Through the glass, I could see a few of my designers, glancing in the way you do when you sense something happening but don't want to be caught looking. 40 people on that floor, and not one of them knew the people across from me. That was the point. My family had no power there. Not in that building, not on that floor, not at that table. My father was not a man who yelled in public. He saved that for kitchens and closed doors. So he sat there in a suit that didn't fit, in a building that wasn't his, staring at a piece of paper that proved what he'd done, and he said nothing. Because for the first time in his life, there was nothing he could say. I stood up. Not fast, not dramatic, the way you stand when a meeting has reached its natural end and everyone knows it. "I'm going to be honest with all 3 of you," I said. "I don't hate you. Hating you would mean you still have power over how I feel, and you don't." My father's eyes were on the table. My brother was picking at the seam of his polo. My mother had stopped crying, but her breathing was ragged, the tissue held against her chest like a compress. "I won't be lending Bryce money," I said. "I won't be pretending we're a happy family for the neighbors. And I won't be accepting a version of this story where Dad invested wisely, and I turned out fine. I let that settle. If there is ever going to be a relationship between us, it starts with 3 things. A genuine apology, not the kind that begins with 'I'm sorry you feel that way'. Accountability for what was taken, not redirected, not minimized, not explained away, and respect for the person I became without you." I picked up my legal pad and my pen. "Until then, my receptionist will show you out." My father stood, his jaw working the way it does when a man has 100 things to say and knows not one of them will help. He looked through the glass, past the rows of designers, at the logo on the far wall, at the skyline beyond, measuring the distance between what he'd imagined for his family and what had actually happened. He didn't apologize. He buttoned his jacket, the wrong button, the way someone does when they aren't thinking, and walked to the door. My brother followed, head down, hands in his pockets, and didn't look at me. My mother was last to stand. She moved slowly, holding the chair for balance, and she looked at me, really looked, the way she hadn't since I was a child, and said very quietly, "Your grandmother would be proud." Something in my chest cracked, just a little, not enough to change anything, enough to feel. "I know," I said. The sound of the studio flooded back in when the door opened. Keyboards, a ringing phone, someone laughing by the coffee station, the ordinary noise of a business running, my business. My father walked out through the open floor with his shoulders pulled in, trying to take up less space, the too tight navy suit, moving through rows of screens and standing desks. And not one person looked up. Not because they were rude, because he was nobody there. The elevator chimed. They stepped in, my father first, then my brother, then my mother, who turned at the last second and looked back down the hall toward my office. I was already walking to my desk. The doors closed, and for the first time in 5 years, I let myself think the thought I'd held at arm's length since I was 18. I won. Not because I was rich, not because I had the bigger office or the better suit or the logo on the wall. I won because I was standing in a room I'd built with my own hands, and the people who had tried to decide my future had just walked out of it with nothing. Let me tell you something I didn't say in that room, something I'd only ever told Paloma and Franklin. I could have sued my father. I still can. Franklin had the case built by the time I was 21. A breach of fiduciary duty is not a gray area under Connecticut law. It is black and white, and a judge could have ordered full restitution plus interest plus my legal fees. He had the withdrawal records, the bank correspondence, the email, and the trust document proving my father had also intercepted legal mail meant for me, a separate provable offense. You have a strong case, he told me when I was 22, if you want to pursue it. I thought about it for 3 months, and then I told him no. 3 reasons, and I'll be honest about all of them. 1, my father was nearly broke, his retirement gutted, the house refinanced, my brother having burned through everything. Winning a judgment against a man with no assets is just an expensive piece of paper. 2, I did not want to spend 2 years reliving the worst day of my life in front of strangers. And 3, the one that mattered most, I did not want to be the woman who built her life around $182,000. I wanted to be the woman who built it without. Keep the file, I told him. If he ever tries to rewrite this story publicly, I want the receipts. The folder went into my desk, not as a weapon, as insurance. Saturday came faster than it had any right to. The convention center was lit up like a cathedral, chandeliers the size of dining tables, 300 people in a ballroom that smelled like lilies and ambition. I'd bought 1 new blazer, midnight blue, tailored, the nicest thing I'd ever owned, and I wore my grandmother's small gold stud earrings and a pair of heels I'd practiced walking in for a week because I was not going to stumble on the one night that mattered. In the inside pocket of that blazer was a slip of paper, yellowed and soft at the folds, a name and number in a dead woman's handwriting. Franklin Ross, Esquire. I carried it the way other people carry a lucky coin, not because I believed in luck, but because I believed in the woman who wrote it. Paloma was at the front table, beaming, 3 of our senior designers beside her. My receptionist had come too, in a dress I'd never seen her wear, proud as anything. They called my name near the end of the evening. Marlo Larkin, co-founder, Iverson and Larkin Design Studio. The walk to the stage felt longer than it was. The spotlight hit, and the room blurred into shapes and warmth and applause. I adjusted the microphone and looked out at 300 faces, and I spoke. 5 years ago, I said, I had $295 and a high school diploma. Someone I trusted told me I should learn a trade because I didn't have real potential. A murmur moved through the room. He was wrong about the potential, I said, but he was right about the trade. I learned the trade of building something from nothing, from blueprints and deadlines, and clients who needed someone to see what they couldn't see yet. I paused. I want to thank my partner, Paloma Iverson, who did not rescue me. She hired me. There is a difference. I want to thank my professors, who treated me like I belonged there before I believed it myself. And I want to thank the woman who gave me my first investment, $14,500 in a sewing box, and taught me that your hands and your head are the only things nobody can ever repossess. My grandmother, Vivienne. Paloma was on her feet, then the table beside her, then the row behind them. A standing ovations that started at the front and moved through the room like a wave. I did not cry on that stage. I saved it for later. At a table near the back, someone was recording on her phone, both hands steady, her face wet and unwiped. It was my Aunt Bernadette. She had come. I'd sent her an invitation 3 weeks earlier, the only family member I reached out to. She sent the video to my mother that night. I didn't name my father. I didn't name my brother. I didn't have to. Anyone who knew the story understood every word, and anyone who didn't just heard a young woman who had earned her place. That was enough. The letter arrived the following Thursday, no return address. Just my office address handwritten on a plain white envelope, the way you write when you're not sure the person on the other end wants to hear from you. I recognized my mother's handwriting at once, the looping M in Marlo, the slight leftward slant she'd had since she was a girl. I opened it at my desk after everyone had gone home. Dear Marlo, it began. I watched the video your aunt sent. I watched it 4 times. I'm writing this at the kitchen table, the same table, and I can't sit here anymore without answering what you said on that stage. I failed you. I need to say it clearly because I've spent 5 years avoiding it. Your father made the decision, but I stood there and let it happen. I've been scared for 26 years, scared of his voice, scared of being wrong, scared that if I spoke up, the whole structure would collapse. So I said nothing while he took your money, your confidence, and your place in this family, and I told myself it was keeping the peace. It wasn't peace. It was cowardice, and I know that now. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't think I've earned it. But I need you to know that I see what I did, and I see who you've become, and I'm done standing by the sink with my mouth shut. I've contacted a divorce attorney. I'm looking for an apartment. For the first time in 30 years, I'm choosing myself. You taught me that the night you walked out that door. I only wish it hadn't taken me 5 years to follow. Your grandmother would be proud of you. I know, because I am. Mom. I set the letter down next to the framed photo of my grandmother, and I cried. Not the grief I'd cried in Franklin's office, for lost time and lost money, and a father who would never see me clearly. This was different. This was mourning the mother and daughter we should have been. The version where she stood up at that table and said, "No, Clifford, this is wrong." The version where I didn't have to leave to learn my own worth. My father sent nothing. No letter, no call, no text. His ego was the last wall standing, and he would die behind it before he let it come down. My brother sent one text the night after the gala, 5 words. "Congrats on the award, Marlowe." No apology, no accountability, no mention of the money or the threats or the years. 5 words that cost him nothing and meant about the same. I read my mother's letter 3 more times, then placed it on my desk beside the sewing box and the photo, the small sacred collection of things that came from people who, in their own way, had believed in me. I didn't write back that night. I wasn't ready, but I didn't throw it away, and that was new. Let me tell you where everyone ended up, because you deserve the whole picture. My father took early retirement 6 months after that meeting, though retirement is a generous word for a department downsized out from under a 55-year-old with a gutted account and a refinanced house. He lives alone in the house on Sycamore Ridge now. The paint is peeling on the shutters he used to repaint every spring. When people ask about me, and my aunt says they do more often now, he changes the subject. He has never apologized. My brother works at a car dealership 2 towns over, a sales associate at 26, on a payment plan for $71,000 of debt. He never finished the degree. He never built the startup. He spent $182,000 of my future on a leased car, a Manhattan address, and bottle service. He has not apologized either, though my aunt says he's quieter now, less sure of himself, and whether that's growth or just defeat, I can't say. My mother moved out in June. She rented a 1-bedroom, small, clean, hers. She got a full-time job at an accounting office and enrolled in a bookkeeping certificate program at a community college. There is an irony there I don't need to explain. Paulette Larkin, at 53, is learning a trade, and for the first time in her life, she has a bank account with only her name on it. I think about that more than I expected to. As for me, I'm still on the 14th floor. We signed 2 new clients last month, and Paloma and I are talking about a second office in New Haven, which would feel like a full circle, given that's where I started, with a bunk bed and a barista apron. The sewing box is still on my desk. The trust document is in my safe. The old file is still in the drawer, untouched. And my mother's letter sits folded on the corner of the desk, where I can see it every morning. I haven't written back yet, but the letter is still there, and so am I. People ask if I'm angry. I was, for about 2 years, when anger was the engine that ran everything. It got me up at 5 for the early shift. It kept me at my desk until midnight redoing work that was already good enough but needed to be undeniable. Anger is excellent fuel, hot and efficient and available in unlimited supply when your family gives you a reason. But it has a shelf life. Let it run too long, and it stops pushing you forward and starts eating you from the inside. Somewhere in my 3rd year, maybe that night in the parking lot, maybe the morning Paloma offered me the job, the anger didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It became something quieter and steadier, less like a fire and more like a foundation. And a foundation is a better thing to build a life on than a fire, because a fire eventually needs something to burn, and a foundation just holds. I could sit across from the 18-year-old, that Uber, watching the white shutters shrink in the window. I don't think I'd tell her it gets easier, because that would be a lie, and I promised at the start I wouldn't lie to you. I'd tell her the truth instead. I'd tell her that the hunger and the $2 dinners and the declined card at the pharmacy are not proof that her father was right. They're the tuition on a degree no school gives out, the one where you learn that your worth was never up for a vote at that kitchen table. I'd tell her that the people who love you don't make you audition for it, and the ones who make you audition don't love you the way you deserve. And it's going to take her years to tell the difference. And that's all right. And then I'd tell her the only thing that ever really mattered, the thing her grandmother pressed into her hands in a hospital room with a grip like iron. Keep your hands busy and your head clear and build. Nobody can repossess what you build inside yourself. I wrote back to my mother on a Tuesday night, not at the office, at home, my apartment in West Hartford, 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, a bookshelf I'd built myself from a kit, and a plant Paloma swore I'd kill in a month that was somehow still alive. Modest, Mine. Every square foot of it earned. I sat at the kitchen table, a different table, one I had chosen, and I wrote. I didn't draft it. I didn't revise it. Mom, I got your letter. I've read it more times than I'll admit. I'm not ready to talk yet, and I don't know when I will be. And I won't lie to you about that, because I think we've both had enough of people in this family saying what they don't mean. But I want you to know this. The fact that you're starting over at 53, that you signed a lease and opened your own account, and enrolled in a program, that takes more courage than anything I've done. I built a company on $14,500 and a lot of spite. You're rebuilding a life after 30 years of silence. I don't know which is harder. I think it might be yours. Grandma would be proud of you too, Marlo. I folded it, addressed it, stuck a stamp on the corner, and set it by the front door where I leave my keys. I did not write to my father. Maybe one day, but today isn't that day. And I've learned not to force doors open for people who slam them in my face. I didn't write to my brother either. There's a difference between a door that's closed and a door that was never real. Bryce and I never had a relationship. We had an arrangement, and he always held the better cards. If he ever comes to me with an apology that doesn't start with a $, I'll listen. But I won't hold my breath. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a door. I'm not opening it yet, but for the first time in 5 years, I'm not boarding it shut either. So that's the story. A father who chose his son, a mother who chose silence, a brother who chose himself, and a daughter who chose to leave and then chose to build. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it always works out, because it doesn't. I got lucky in ways I can measure. A grandmother who planned ahead, a mentor who saw what my family refused to, a stubbornness I was probably born with, and I got unlucky in the way that counts most. I lost my family before I was old enough to understand what that would cost me. But if you are the one they counted out, the one they overlooked and underfunded and underestimated, I won't tell you it'll be easy, and I won't promise you a corner office or a trophy. That's not the point. The point is this. The moment you stop waiting for them to see your worth and start building on it yourself, that is the moment everything shifts. Not the money, not the title, not the name on the wall. You are what changes. And once you do, nobody, not your father, not your brother, not the voice in your head that sounds like both of them, gets to take that from you. My grandmother was right about the only thing that ever really mattered. They can repossess the car and the house and the money with your name on it. They can never repossess your hands and your head. Tomorrow morning, I'll pick up my keys, grab the envelope by the door, and drop it in the mailbox on the corner. Then I'll drive to work. If this story stayed with you, if you felt something, follow along, and I'll see you in the next one.